Naha, nin so Ojiig Corbiere dem, wedem chigging don jaba, nanabojo Anishinaabe duk, minwa mandagan ok, minwa mandakwe ok. Minwa dash nui ke migwechwe akagundak enki jik, minwa jaba kwejik. Minwa ge makwena makundak de jik, pognege jik, minwa negamojik, memdege dash, oya gi nagumtuan ne gi son. So first, I have to thank the organizers for asking me to be here. As Isidore had said, I'm of the Ruffed Grouse clan, and I'm from Chiging. My name, Anishinaabe name is Ojiig, that means the fisher. I was asked to come here and talk about wampum belts, and at first I thought, what does wampum belts have to do with the reconciliation? The next thing I thought was, should I just recite them? And I thought, no, I had thought about this. I was initially asked maybe 3 to 5 months ago. So, gike na nagarawendan wa debatama miksa pikkanan. How am I going to talk about this belt, these belts? And then we talk about these teaching wigwams. As some of you know, that's what this Shingwak home was called initially, that they wanted to make these teaching wigwams. Then I started thinking of these council fires of learning. I thought maybe we should actually call it this council fires of learning. And I'll kind of explain why. So sometimes it'll, try and bear with me here. It's going to seem contradictory what I'm saying. And the reason it's contradictory is because we're in such so much history has gone on between colonial institutions and our grassroots people, Anishinaabe, our fellow Anishinaabe. So, like I said, the first thing I talked to this one fella, Jim Windigo, and Memashka Kwanmat is his name. And we just got talking, and then the topic of discussion was actually the use of drums in the church. And I said, what do you think of that? And he says, oh, that's just round 2. That's just phase 2. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, who actually tells them which song they're going to play? Who tells them when they can play that drum? And who even gets to tell them when, if they can bring that drum in there? That's who's the boss, he says. That's why he says he calls it phase 2, because they're the ones who actually tell us, our spiritual leaders or our singers or our drummers, where and when they can bring that in there. So he didn't like that. Next one is Rick Hill, my co-presenter. We were talking and we were both co-presented at the Treaty of Niagara commemoration 250th anniversary. And he was asked whether or not, what he thought about people giving pipes and names to the Prime Minister and headdresses. And he says, I don't know what I'm going to do if I see Stephen Harper puffing on another pipe. Because he says, because he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe in it. But he participates, and then that's the thing is what we talk about, tokenism in a sense. So why I bring that up is that we have to actually be sincere. And so why I'm saying this might be contradictory is what you'll see later on, is that I actually think that we do have to invite a bit more of these ceremonies into the institution. The last person that I was talking to, particular to this presentation, was Sherry Farrell, a good friend of mine. And we were talking about an exhibit that was on, and that exhibit in that particular gallery, and this became a bit of a controversy, was they said you had to wear a skirt to go in there, into that gallery. And so she had said, a gallery will never be a lodge. And that I really clung to that. And I thought to myself, putting these 3 things together, that's what we actually, when they're asking us what can or can't universities do, that's one of the things that I think we have to really bear in mind, that these are our traditions, this is our knowledge, these are our pipes and our drums, but this is also a space where we come to learn and share with each other. But we don't send people here to become our elders. That's the thing that we have to really keep in mind. So that being said, I'll somewhat contradict myself. There was a book written in the 90s called The Middle Ground, and this was actually a concept, and people are starting to critique it, but it's useful for this purpose, is that when the colonizers came, they had to actually meet us halfway. And that's what this concept of the middle ground is. And what this concept is that the colonizers actually had to learn our ways in order to get business done here. And when they had to learn to do our ways, they actually accepted pipes, and they accepted wampum belts, and they listened to drums, and they brought us gifts to our territory. And the most important thing they brought to each of these gatherings was tobacco. They brought tobacco to us, our leaders, our elders, our women, and all of our people whenever they came into our area and whenever they wanted to have a council with us. So this is a picture of a cabinet and a mantle with so-called curiosities. But this was Sir William Johnson, what he had said to the Mississauga in 1761 at Niagara. Brethren, the many belts of wampum and calumet of peace which hang in this room convince me of your and of neighboring nations' good intentions and the just sense which you all entertain of the blessings arising from peace and our friendship. And he noted that in the commanders' rooms in each of these forts, and there's forts here at Michilimackinac, there was a fort at Drummond Island, there was also a fort at St. Joseph's Island. And this is all part of what we call the covenant chain relationship, our nation-to-nation relationship with the colonial government and the crown. But they brought gifts to our island, to our lands, each and every year. And what they said they were doing is that at that time was polishing the chain to maintain harmonious relationships. So I won't go too much further into that, but the main thing, the metaphor of polishing the chain is actually what now we call reconciliation. But back then, we got together year after year after year to actually polish that chain, to actually settle grievances that occurred throughout the year. And that's the kind of format that I think history can show us that had worked for a little while. This, of course, is Ojibwe Coons, the great Ojibwe chief that was here, and who actually this institution is named after. Well, actually, his son, Augustine. But here, when I first started talking about these wampum and wampum belts, a lot of the Anishinaabe people, my fellow Anishinaabe people, would say, "What are you doing? This is a Mohawk thing. We don't use wampum." And here in 1829, holding a few strings of wampum in his hands, Ojibwe Coons said, "Father, the great master of life gave us pipes and wampum for the purpose of conveying our ideas from man to man. I return thanks to the Great Spirit that made me and to my great father, the King, who supports me. What he promised to our forefathers, he continues to perform. He is charitable to the Redskins." Not the football team, but... This is a wampum belt that I wanted to talk about here, and I was going to recite. And it was given by the Haudenosaunee to the Anishinaabe. And the council was actually held here in Sault Ste. Marie. And that they had made, people call this belt now, and I even did in the past, used to call this belt Yellowhead's belt. But actually these belts aren't named after individual people. So I actually I tried to get people now to call this the Eternal Council Fire belt. And there were 5 emblems on that belt and a white road of peace down the middle of it. That white road of peace meant good relations between all of us. But the Haudenosaunee had come here, and we were inveterate enemies, and we were bitter enemies for a long time. And we fought and killed each other in numerous places, but we made peace. And the main thing about this is that we said we ignited a council fire at Sault Ste. Marie and that it would never be extinguished. And then secondly, they said our grandfathers, both the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, went to Manitoulin and they ignited another council fire there, and they placed there a white fish that represented purity. Then they moved on and they said they went to an island across Penetanguishene Bay, and there they also ignited another fire. And at that fire, they placed there a beaver, which represented wisdom, and that all the actions of our ancestors were done in wisdom. Next, they went to the Narrows, Minjikaning, and our ancestors there ignited another council fire. And there they said they put a dish with one ladle, and that was the dish with one spoon, how we were to treat the land. But also at that place, they said they entrusted this belt to the Caribou clan, Adikadodem Wat. Those with the Caribou clan were the ones to be entrusted with this Wampum Belt and its talk. And they said there they hung up the sun, and that they said all of our actions of our grandfathers were done under the watchful eyes of the sun, meaning the Creator, and that these promises would be held forever. So that's the thing that I want to urge each and every one of you as a university staff and leadership, that when you look at this and how we renewed our belts amongst ourselves as Anishinaabe people, indigenous people, but also with colonial entities, that it was done under the sun, that we believed what we had said and that we believed what you had said, and that each and every time we did this and we took this sacred wampum and we took the pipe, that it was actually meant as a pledge forever. But that forever actually meant working together, and that by working together, we actually renewed it year after year. So lastly, they ignited a council fire at the mouth of the River Credit, and on top of there was a tall pine tree at that mouth, and on top of that tall pine tree, they placed their migaze, that white-headed bald eagle, and this one represented swiftness and watchfulness, and he was to watch all of those council fires as well as the council fires of the Haudenosaunee. And if anything was amiss or any disease coming or enemies, that migaze was then the one to fly to all those council fires and inform everybody of the impending trouble or difficulty. But this is the framework that I wanted to propose to you. This is a fellow here named Charles Kabagum. And his father was a chief on what we now would call Chamokmont King, the American side. But in this text here, he says that his brother was Wabamimi, and that means the white pigeon. And that Wabamimi was a chief here on the Canadian side, and that he had held a wampum belt as well. And that was made for the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Bodeadami, and the Menominee. And that these four were to act as brothers with each other. And that also this belt had a road through it, but also it was accompanied by a peace pipe. So this isn't what the belt is. That's just a similar looking belt that I imagine it would look like. A white road of peace and then 3 diamonds, but what Kabagum's talking about, it likely would have been 4 diamonds. On a wampum belt, a diamond usually meant a nation. Here, this is another belt, but this was the Mississaugas of Mimishkodeyang, and that's now called Rice Lake area. And after their chief had died, he brought the belt back to Niagara and to actually inform Sir William Johnson that their chief had passed, but he also wanted to tell him that our relations are still good. Here is described on this belt your habitation and fireplace, and here is ours with the road open, clear, and safe between them. The agreement has been long between us. The sky has since cleared, and the sun shines bright whensoever we meet. It is so long since we counseled together to spread peace throughout the land, and we have now the pleasure to find it established. Gave a belt with 2 villages in white upon it. So again, this is a different belt. This isn't the same one, but this is how this might have looked. So this is what I'm trying to show you here is this is the belt that would have been kept at that fort. And if we think of each of your universities as a council fire of learning, then we deposit something there, but it's your leadership that ends up having to be entrusted to keep that and to activate it year after year, and to call our people, whether it's the students or whether it's other leaders in the surrounding area, to actually renew that. So if we actually looked at each of your universities as council fires of learning, then we had included what Chief Stephen Augustine had talked about, Grand Chief Stephen Augustine had talked about, bringing in our spirituality. and then relying upon those pipes again, and relying upon those wampum belts again, and those feathers. And you see the staffs here that we have and the flags. So if we put our faith and belief in that, that will actually, I believe, will help us. So here, this is about the importance of the pipe. So again, remember I started off saying that an art gallery will never be a lodge, and also that the elder Memash Quanamat had said it's only phase 2. But prior to since that, from 1760 to now, that's been a lot of years, 250 years plus. But back then, we actually used to deposit pipes and wampum belts with those officials, so that whenever we met the following year, we actually got together and smoked that and renewed it. So here, this is the Odawa speaker then took up a pipe in 1760 belonging to the nation and said, "Brother, to confirm what we have said to you, I give you this peace pipe, which is known to all the nations living in this country, and when they see it, they will know it to be the pipe of peace belonging to our nation." Then he delivered the pipe. What I don't know now myself personally is I've seen this, Ho-Chunk people, Menominee people, Odawa people, they all presented a pipe and they all said the same thing. All the people will know this is our pipe. If I saw those 4 pipes, I wouldn't know which one was which nation now. But that's the thing where we're trying to now learn about and uncover. And so if we had this kind of pipes specifically decorated and that people actually knew what these pipes looked like and they belonged to each nation, then we would be reviving our knowledge. So here, this is a shage, that means a crane, or heron rather. "Brother, the pipe is sent by all our chiefs. We were obliged several times along the road to hoist up this pipe in our canoe to prevent being scratched on our way. We now leave it here with you, that may be used whenever any of our people come here, and then think of the friendship subsisting between them and the English." Then laid down the pipe. So these two here again, as many of you know, hopefully many of you know, Pontiac was a chief, as well as Gayasota, who was a Seneca chief, had risen up and had fought the English in 1763. And people were killed. And here, they wanted to bring them back to peace. And in 1764, there was a great gathering at Niagara in which peace was established. But what people don't really know is that Pontiac did not go to Niagara in 1764. He did not want to enter into peace with the British, and he only did so, made allusions to it in 1765 when he presented a pipe and a wampum belt. And then George Croghan, who was Sir William Johnson's deputy, was then the one who took that pipe and belt next year to Oswego. And then that's when Pontiac finally showed up and entered into peaceful relations with the British. But if you read that text, you see here the second one in 1766, that he caused Pontiac's pipe to be lit. "In order to confirm and strengthen your proceedings with Mr. Croghan last year, I hope you will remember all that had then passed, and I desire that you will often repeat them to your young people and keep them fresh in your minds, as we shall do on our parts. As a proof of which, here are your calumet and belts, which Mr. Croghan sent me from you. We commit everything that passed to writing, so that our words cannot be lost or forgotten." So again, the idea is that these pipes were deposited with the official there, as well as the words and the commitment. This is Andrew J. Blackbird. His name was Makadebenese, and his father was a chief at the Odawa Cross Village. So he says here, "Every tribe of Indians far and near, even as far as Manitoba country out north, deposited their pipe of peace with the head chief of the Odawa nation as a pledge of continual peace and friendship." The reason I bring this up is to show that actually we had pipes with our own people, for our own mutual alliance and friendship. But we also had pipes that we deposited with colonial entities that were kept in the forts as well. So these two things were parallel, and that's what I want to emphasize, that we don't want to say we're giving this up when we put a pipe there or a wampum belt or any other spiritual item. This is how these calumet pipes looked back then. So lastly, I have to just say that we have underrepresented our offices or institutions in Anishinaabe governance. This is only just a bit. There's also words about the warriors, but this is only for this purpose here. We had a person that would have been named Mijinawe, and that's called an aide-de-camp, but it was translated as a steward or ambassador. And of course, many people know now of Oshkabewis. A lot of people know Oshkabewis, but they don't necessarily know Mijinawe. These were two complementary roles. Oshkabewis was a ceremonial attendant, or is a ceremonial attendant, and Mijinawe was what some would call a pipe bearer. But he was also the one who was the chief's so-called aide-de-camp. He was the one that helped the chief. So what I would actually like to suggest as well is that each institution have in your respective languages. In our area, if we had somebody at Algoma or at Shingwak that actually was called a Mijinawe, and that they kept one of these items that was given, that they would pledge this idea of reconciliation to this council fire of learning. And that each and every year, that pipe or that eagle staff or that belt or whatever form it takes is actually fed and feasted, and all the people feasted as well, and that this harmonious resolution or restitution or whatever you want to call it, reconciliation, is forwarded each and every year. And that was the purpose of what the Haudenosaunee called this condolence ceremony, that you wipe away the tears and you clear the throat and the ears, and you unblock the ears, as well as the throat, and set their hearts aright with using wampum feathers as well as soft doe skin to do that. So if we had that in our institutions, and we recognize that all of our Anishinaabe students still are on a path to healing, and that in this sense, an institution can actually assist on this road for Anishinaabe people, but it's just a part of the learning journey. They're not the ones that are to be totally invested with it. And then the other part of this discussion that I don't get to talk about, but I hope that Rick Hill brings it up, is of course about funding and power. The last thing I want to mention is a Seneca fella I used to work with, and his name's Henry Lickers. And we were on this Eagle project about the contaminants in the Great Lakes. And he always used to say, we want to have the zeal to deal, he says. I call this the zeal to deal. The 3 E's of the zeal to deal: equity, empowerment, and equality. Do we have an equal voice at the table? Are we going to be empowered after the program? And is there real equity? Is the money really shared, or is the lion's share staying with the institution? So if we abide by those 3 E's, then I think a whole reconciliation program can be a bit more effective. Miigwechki bezinda mekkene enchiek meanwhile dash jabakwe jik gokke miigwechwe ak meanwhile dash naha.